Hey, it's the start of the second week of Wimbledon, and the breaks in play are only getting longer, so to help you pass the time I've taken a look at what I consider to be 5 of the most underrated tennis titles of all time. For clarification, this is not the 5 best tennis games of all time, so you won't find entries from the Mario Tennis, Virtua Tennis and Topspin franchises here, but instead titles that have been seemingly lost forever. All 5 of these deserve to be rediscovered, so without further ado, let's begin. Ready? Play. Number 5. Rafael Nadal may not be the power he once was, but he was the star of this surprisingly experimental DS tennis title, aptly named Rafa Nadal Tennis. Although it plays a solid enough game with the D-pad and buttons, it's when you switch to the stylus control method that things start to get interesting. It relies on you making various prods and swipes on the touchscreen to move your character and make shots. You swipe down for a drop shot, for example, and swipe up for a lob. This setup is tricky to grasp at first, but you'd probably expect that considering it's completely different to almost anything that's come before it. One specific element I really do like is that serves into the corners, which are usually a mere formality to execute in most tennis games, are much trickier to pull off here, resulting in more faults. Now that may not sound like a plus, but it does make the game a more accurate representation of the sport, which personally I see as a good thing. The presentation may be solid rather than electrifying, and there is little in the way of options, but overall Rafa Nadal Tennis is an admirable attempt to do something different that works far better than you might expect. Number 4. The SNES was well represented by tennis games, with both Super and Smash Tennis being huge fun. The argument over which is better still rages on to this day. So it's a little ironic that Jimmy Connor's Pro Tennis Tour on the SNES, a game linked to such an outspoken and prickly personality, would be such a quietly brilliant little gem. At first glance the signs don't look promising though. An outdated license even for the time, a largely inexperienced developer, and a cart that uses a picture of a visibly distressed Connors. Don't worry Jimmy, everything's gonna be okay. But it offers a solid game of tennis, and throws in some interesting and unique additions too, such as a 4-player mode and a more accurate serving system. Not all the inclusions are great, such as the baffling mode which allows the computer to move the character for you, but most are at least interesting. There's even a court that takes part in a snowstorm, something which the ATP certainly wouldn't support. Super and Smash Tennis might play a more solid game, but Jimmy Connor's Pro Tennis Tour is happy to experiment a little, and subsequently is well worth a look. The Lynx version isn't that bad either, even if the pixelated face of Connors in it is the thing of nightmares. Number 3. At first glance, Hard Hitter 2 appears to be another budget title that should be chucked onto the failed Virtua Tennis clone scrap heap. But play it for just a few minutes and suddenly you realise this is no copycat. It plays by its own rules, and its rules are hard not to go along with. Be it the deceptively deep controls, variety of perspectives you can play from, and superbly shambolic presentation, it's clear the developers were putting a lot of effort into this, even if parts of the experience don't particularly work. Ultimately, it's pretty hard not to love a game that has lines of commentary like this.
He can put a ball through a needle hole!
At times lovingly lackadaisical, and at others maddeningly sublime, Hard Hitter 2 is the cult classic tennis game to rule them all. Looks like they had the Midas touch, huh? Ah, forget it. Number 2. Despite the system being famed for its shooters, the PC Engine did have its fair share of sports titles, with Final Match Tennis possibly being its best one. Unless this counts as a sport. I'm pretty sure it doesn't though. With crisp visuals and fast-paced gameplay, there's not much I can say that's wrong with it really. It just reminds me of Super Tennis, and that's high praise in my book, especially considering it's running on an 8-bit system. The sound effects are blooptastic, the players on the character select screen look like convicts, and even the PC Engine version uses English text for the menus for some reason. What's not to love? And number 1 is... Snoopy Tennis. No, not that one. This one. I'm serious. I've placed a game based around a comic strip that features a costume-wearing dog and a bird named after a music festival at the top of my list, and I didn't hesitate for a second in doing so. One reason is the sheer surprise factor. On first glance you'd expect this to be a mediocre effort at best, but the main reason is that this plays possibly the finest version of tennis of any portable title I've seen. The way you can ping the ball back and forth, the crisp winners you can execute from almost anywhere. Whenever I play this, I'm hooked after mere seconds. Surprisingly, it's as much fun solo as it is in multiplayer, with a CPU that doesn't simply fall for the same thing over and over, a sin that so many tennis games are guilty of. Instead, the AI can be playing a baseline rally 1 second, and then rush to the net the next, daring you to pull off the perfect passing shot to win the point. You never quite know what's coming next, which makes things as gripping as a real-life tennis match. It's not the most complete game, of course. Its perfunctory spread of options is laughable compared to something like the all-encompassing career mode of Mario Tennis, but there are some interesting additions, such as a squash mode which puts walls on the side of the court. The presentation is also a little disappointing, especially considering the license, with the championship mode having no story to speak of, and the creepy fixed facial expressions on the players are a little unsettling, to say the least. Ultimately though, the core gameplay of Snoopy Tennis is so strong it's hard not to be won over, and I think that makes it the most underrated tennis game of all time. That's game, set and match for this list then, but please do let me know which tennis games you think need to be dragged from the wilderness of obscurity and showered with praise. If you're a fan of this channel, then please do like this video by the way, subscribe to stay up to date when new content is posted, and follow me on Twitter and Facebook. As always, thanks for watching.
He looks like he really enjoys tennis.